Emma Phoenix had no intention of drawing attention to herself that morning. Dressed in a soft cashmere sweater, dark jeans, and Italian-made flats, she looked every bit the image of quiet sophistication. With her hair styled in an elegant updo and her makeup minimal yet flawless, she carried herself with the quiet grace of a woman who had nothing to prove. She stepped into Elysian Glow, one of Los Angeles' most exclusive luxury cosmetic stores on Rodeo Drive, intending only to purchase a skincare collection she had carefully researched. But almost immediately, the atmosphere turned cold. Despite standing patiently and respectfully near the high-end product displays, not a single sales associate acknowledged her. Emma noticed other women, all white, dressed in designer labels, being greeted warmly, offered champagne, and escorted to private consultation areas. Still, she remained calm, moving toward a rare six-piece collection valued at over $20,000. That's when the store manager, Charles Bennett, approached her. His tone was patronizing from the start. He asked if she was lost, then suggested she couldn't afford the products. "These items cost more than you make in a year," he scoffed. When Emma asserted her right to browse, Alexander called security. Within moments, 2 large guards grabbed her by the arms and forcibly escorted her out, in full view of customers, some of whom filmed the incident on their phones. Through it all, Emma didn't yell or cry. She stood tall, her dignity intact, but the pain in her eyes said everything. She wasn't just being removed. She was being judged, disrespected, and humiliated simply for being a black woman who didn't look like she belonged. As the glass doors of Elysian Glow closed behind her, Emma Phoenix stood still on the busy Rodeo Drive sidewalk, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from fury tightly contained. She straightened her sweater, smoothed her jeans with deliberate calm, and pulled out her phone. Her fingers, steady despite what had just happened, hovered over familiar contact. She pressed William. On the other end of the line, William Reynolds, her husband, partner, and one of the most influential tech billionaires in the world, picked up almost instantly. "Emma?" he asked, immediately sensing the tension in her voice. Emma took a breath and spoke softly, her voice firm but clipped. "William, you're not going to believe what just happened. I was just thrown out of Elysian Glow. They grabbed me, humiliated me, right there in front of everyone." She paused as he responded, clearly reacting with the same mix of disbelief and outrage that now pulsed through her veins. "No," she said, answering his question before he could finish. "Don't do anything rash. I know you want to protect me, and I love you for that, but I need to handle this my way." Her words weren't empty. Emma wasn't just any woman, and William wasn't just any husband. Together, they were a quiet force, powerful, strategic, and deeply committed to one another. While the public knew William Reynolds as a tech mogul who built an empire from scratch, few knew the woman who stood beside him. Emma had earned her own success. From humble beginnings in East Los Angeles as the daughter of Haitian immigrants to graduating from Columbia and Harvard Business School, her grace, intelligence, and unwavering values were what had first caught William's attention at a charity gala years ago. What Charles Bennett and his staff at Elysium had failed to recognize was that the woman they judged so casually wasn't some social media influencer looking for free samples. She was a co-founder of several philanthropic ventures, a respected business leader in her own right, and the wife of a man whose personal wealth could buy not just the products in the store, but the entire company. As Emma ended the call, she glanced back toward the store's windows. The staff inside were still watching her, smug in their assumption that they'd removed an unworthy customer. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't begin to imagine, was at this very moment, this act of public disrespect had triggered a response far beyond anything they were prepared for. Emma tucked her phone away, lifted her chin, and walked down the avenue, not as a defeated shopper, but as a woman already setting into motion a plan that would change everything. The reckoning had quietly begun. Back at the Reynolds penthouse overlooking Griffith Park, William Reynolds stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Phone pressed to his ear, his jaw tight with controlled anger. The sunlight poured into their elegant yet understated home, but the warmth of the day did nothing to soften the storm gathering inside him. The moment Emma had called to tell him what happened at Elysian Glow, something shifted inside him, a quiet but unshakable resolve. This wasn't just about his wife being disrespected. This was personal. And for William, personal meant action. "I don't care what it costs," he said to his legal advisor on the other end of the line. "Buy the company. I want controlling interest before sunrise." William wasn't a man who made idle threats. At only 38, he had built Reynolds Technologies into one of the most powerful tech empires in the world. His business instincts were razor sharp, and his team was handpicked, fast, discreet, and effective. As soon as Emma hung up the phone, he had called Marcus, his top attorney and corporate strategist. Within the hour, they were already tracing the corporate structure behind Elysian Glow. What they discovered was that Elysium was owned by a parent company called Pinnacle Luxury Group, a conglomerate that operated high-end retail chains globally. Its stock had taken a dip the previous quarter, leaving it vulnerable. That was all William needed. By 4:30 a.m., while most of the city slept, William's team had acquired 63% of Pinnacle's outstanding shares through a series of carefully calculated transactions. The board had been notified. The legal filings were complete. As of that moment, William Reynolds was no longer just a disgruntled husband. He was a new owner of Elysian Glow and everything it represented. But for William, this wasn't about revenge. It was about setting a new standard. "This is about accountability," he had told Marcus. "It's about justice, not just for Emma, but for every person who's ever been made to feel small in places like that." He wasn't alone in his determination. Emma, though hurt, had remained calm and clear. She wanted change, not chaos. That's why William's approach was strategic, quiet, precise. His goal was not to burn the place down. It was to take it over and make it better. By dawn, plans were already underway for a quiet but dramatic visit to the store. There would be no shouting, no press conference, no empty gestures. William Reynolds would walk through the same doors that had closed on his wife just 24 hours earlier, not as a customer, but as the man who now signed the paychecks. And for those who had judged Emma by her appearance, the reckoning would arrive not with noise, but with undeniable power. It was 9:58 a.m. on a crisp Manhattan morning when a sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop in front of Elysian Glow on Rodeo Drive. Pedestrians slowed their pace. Some stopped entirely. Heads turned. Phones rose. The luxury vehicle, polished to perfection, reflected the city's skyline like a mirror. Before the bystanders could finish guessing which celebrity might emerge, a second identical Rolls-Royce pulled in behind the first, followed moments later by 4 black Escalades, all moving in perfect formation. The message was unmistakable. Something significant was about to happen. The door to the first car opened, and Emma Phoenix stepped out with a quiet grace that demanded attention. She wore a perfectly tailored white pantsuit that caught the morning light, her hair elegantly pinned, her expression calm but unreadable. There was no flashiness, no excessive jewelry, no visible designer logos. Just presence, a presence that turned heads and silenced whispers. From the second car stepped William Reynolds, tall, composed, and dressed in a custom charcoal gray suit. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a man on a mission. He joined them on the sidewalk, and together, they approached the entrance of the very store that had humiliated her the day before. Inside, the staff had noticed a growing crowd. Several employees stood near the windows, trying not to appear too curious. Charles Bennett, the store's general manager, emerged from his office, adjusting his tie and brushing down his suit jacket. His smile was a practiced kind, polished hollow and meant for VIPs. He didn't yet know that the man and woman approaching the door were not just customers. They were his new employers. At exactly 10 a.m., the doors opened. Emma entered first. The rhythmic sound of her heels on the marble echoed through the quiet store like a drumbeat. Behind her came William and a dozen sharply dressed business professionals, each carrying sleek portfolios marked with the Reynolds Holdings logo. The Elysium staff froze. Some recognized Emma from the day before, the woman they had watched being escorted out. But today, she walked in with the confidence of someone who no longer needed permission to be there. Alexander approached, forcing a wide smile as he extended his hand. "Welcome to Elysian Glow," he said, voice slightly strained. "We're honored to have you with us today." Emma didn't shake his hand. She didn't need to. Her gaze was steady, cool, and unwavering. William stepped forward, his voice low and controlled but impossible to ignore. "I believe you met my wife yesterday," he said, looking directly at Alexander. For a moment, silence fell like a curtain. Then the realization washed over the room like a tidal wave. The same woman who had been tossed out as if she didn't belong was now standing beside the man who owned the company. Eyes widened, mouths opened. One employee dropped a glass, the sound echoing in the stunned silence. William turned to the assembled staff. "We're not here to shop," he said. "We're here to talk about what happened yesterday and what it means for the future of this company." He nodded to a staff member. The blinds lowered, the doors locked. What was once a temple of exclusivity had just become the setting for a long overdue reckoning. The lights dimmed slowly inside the Elysian Glow flagship store. What had begun as a routine morning on Rodeo Drive had now turned into a moment of reckoning, not just for one man, but for an entire institution. Employees stood in a hushed semicircle, their faces tense, uncertain. Some fidgeted with their name tags. Others glanced nervously toward the exit, but there would be no leaving. Not yet. At the front of the store, William Reynolds stood with quiet authority. His arm rested gently on Emma's back, a gesture not of possession but of unity. Beside them, a projection screen flickered to life. A member of William's executive team stepped forward and addressed the stunned group. "What you're about to see is not just about yesterday," she said firmly. "It's about a pattern, one that has existed far too long and ends today." The first slide was simple, a pie chart. It showed that over 92% of Elysium's customer base across its 50 global stores was white, despite being located in some of the most diverse cities in the world. Gasps echoed through the room. Then came video clips, surveillance footage from stores across the country. In one, a well-dressed black man entered a location in Chicago and was never greeted, while white customers were offered samples and assistance within seconds. In another, a Latina woman browsing in Los Angeles was tailed by a security guard for her entire visit. In store after store, the pattern was the same: warm welcomes for some, cold suspicion for others. And then came the footage from just 24 hours earlier, Emma's humiliation in full, unforgiving color. There she was, standing calmly at the luxury skincare counter, when Charles Bennett approached her with that condescending smirk. The room went completely still as they watched him question her ability to pay, mock her, and call security. The final moments, Emma being dragged out by 2 guards while customers looked on, hit the room like a blow to the chest. Several employees turned away. One young associate visibly trembled. The air was thick with shame, but William wasn't finished. At his signal, the doors opened again. In walked 5 individuals, men and women of color, all professionally dressed, all carrying themselves with quiet dignity. They took seats at the front, facing the staff. A distinguished older black woman spoke first. "My name is Dr. Eleanor Jenkins," she said calmly. "I'm chief of neurosurgery at Mount Sinai. I came here 3 months ago to buy gifts for my team. I was told the products were likely out of my range and advised to visit a more affordable shop down the street." Next was Carlos Rivera, a hedge fund manager who had spent over $30,000 on client gifts, yet had been followed the entire time he shopped. Then Lydia Johnson, a respected state Supreme Court judge, told how she was asked if she was looking for the employee entrance. One by one, they shared their stories that mirrored Emma's experience with chilling familiarity. And just when the weight of their words had begun to settle, 3 former Elysium employees entered the room. They had been fired or driven out for speaking up about the very same bias now being exposed. "I was told to prioritize customers who looked the part," one former sales associate said. It was never stated outright, but we all knew what that meant. Alexander, once so smug and composed, now sat slumped in the front row, ashen-faced, sweat beading at his temple. Every word spoken was a chisel breaking down the illusion he had built his career on, that he was just upholding brand image. But the truth was now in the open, and there was no turning back. What had once been whispered in back rooms and denied with polished PR statements was now being broadcast in full daylight, in the very halls that had once silenced those voices. The reckoning had begun, and this time it had witnesses. The silence after the testimonials was deafening. The employees of Elysian Glow, from the most seasoned sales associate to the youngest stockroom clerk, stood frozen in place. Some were pale. Others avoided eye contact. What had started as a typical morning now felt like a courtroom, and no one knew whether they were the jury, the witnesses, or the accused. William Reynolds stepped forward again, this time without notes, without a screen. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of finality. "This is not about a single bad day," he said. "This is about a culture, a way of doing business built on exclusion, assumption, and silent cruelty. And it ends today." He paused. No one dared move. "Effective immediately," he continued, "Elysian Glow will be shut down, all 50 locations, across the United States and internationally. Doors will close at noon today. Every store, every counter, every boutique." The words landed like thunder. A stunned gasp swept through the room. One saleswoman clutched her chest. A manager in the back whispered, "No." Under her breath, panic rose, quiet but powerful, like a wave swelling just before it crashes. "This is corporate suicide," someone muttered. But William didn't flinch. "We will rebuild," he said, "but not from the same foundation. The brand as it stands no longer exists. In its place, we will create something radically different, a company rooted in respect, inclusion, and accountability." From behind him, members of his legal and HR team began handing out envelopes, termination documents for most, along with 2-week severance packages. Some employees took them in stunned silence. Others cried, pleaded, or looked to Emma, hoping for mercy. One woman, Veronica, a senior associate with over 7 years at the store, stepped forward, voice quivering. "Please," she said, "I've dedicated my life to this company. I have clients who rely on me, sales goals I've always met. I didn't know who she was yesterday." Emma's gaze was steady. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was gentle but firm, the voice of someone who had spent her life being judged, now refusing to do the same. "That's exactly the problem," she said. "You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with dignity." Veronica's face crumpled. She stepped back, clutching the envelope to her chest. Emma continued, "Some of you will have the opportunity to reapply. When we reopen, we'll review performance records, customer service history, and conduct interviews. Those who treated all customers, regardless of their race, attire, or status, with respect, may find a place in the new company. The rest of you, this is your moment to reflect." Security, now under William's employ, gently guided employees out one by one. No shouts, no dramatics, just quiet consequences. Charles Bennett remained seated, hollow and unmoving, his career dismantled in under an hour. The same man who once ordered Emma out with such certainty now sat amid the wreckage of his own arrogance, powerless. As the last employee exited, Emma turned once more to face the space. Display cases gleamed under cold lights. Not a single item had been sold, yet something far more valuable had been exchanged. The first step toward justice. And from the ashes of humiliation, a new legacy was ready to rise. 6 months had passed since the day of reckoning. Elysian Glow, once a symbol of exclusivity and division, had been wiped from the map. The staff who had once embodied the old brand were either gone or retrained under a new philosophy, one rooted in inclusivity, respect, and fairness. The luxury world had already begun to feel the tremors of change, but nothing could prepare them for what was about to happen. The grand reopening of what had once been Elysian Glow was unlike anything the luxury retail world had ever seen. The newly rebranded store, now known as Legacy, stood on Rodeo Drive like a beacon, no longer a fortress of exclusion, but a temple of equality and empowerment. As the doors opened to the public for the first time, the crowd outside didn't just see a store. They saw a movement. Inside, the atmosphere was light, welcoming, and stunning. Gone were the intimidating glass-enclosed displays that made customers feel like intruders. Instead, the interior was elegant yet approachable, a harmonious blend of high-end craftsmanship with a design that invited people to breathe, to explore, and to engage. There were no hidden price tags, no judgment, no barriers, just beauty in its purest, most inclusive form. Emma Phoenix stood at the center of it all. She wore a simple yet sophisticated black dress, and her posture radiated both strength and grace. The cameras flashed as she addressed the crowd. She was no longer the woman who had been dragged out of a store in humiliation. She was the creative director of Legacy, the visionary behind this new era of luxury retail. And as she spoke to the gathered press, there was no trace of the pain she had once felt. Instead, there was only pride, confidence, and the knowledge that this was just the beginning. "We are creating something that has never existed before," Emma told the reporters, her voice carrying through the room with quiet authority. Luxury without exclusion. Exceptional quality available to anyone who values it, regardless of how they look, where they come from, or what assumptions others might make about them. Behind her, the displays were filled with beauty products crafted with the finest ingredients. Yet, it wasn't the expensive skincare or the designer fragrances that caught people's attention. It was the ethos that radiated from every corner of the store. The idea that anyone who walked through these doors would be treated with dignity, not based on their appearance, but their character. The launch was a massive success. Customers flooded the store, not only because of its luxurious offerings, but because they could feel the change in the air. Legacy was more than just a brand. It was a promise to anyone who had ever been made to feel invisible in the luxury world, to anyone who had been denied service simply because of how they looked. And as if to prove their commitment to true change, Legacy launched an initiative to support new designers from underprivileged backgrounds. Emma herself mentored these individuals, giving them the platform they deserved and the resources they needed to bring their vision to life. The first cohort included Sophie Martin, a former Elysium employee, who had witnessed Emma's humiliation firsthand, but had been inspired to create a skincare line based on her Jamaican grandmother's recipes. Sophie Martin's products now sat proudly on Legacy's shelves, a testament to the company's commitment to both diversity and excellence. As the store filled with customers, the staff, a reflection of New York's rich diversity, moved gracefully through the aisles, assisting with a level of care and understanding that was new to the luxury retail world. The feeling of community was palpable. Everyone, from the seasoned fashionistas to the first-time shoppers, felt as though they belonged. The old, elitist model had been shattered. Legacy wasn't just about selling products. It was about creating a space where everyone could shine. In the midst of all this, Emma couldn't help but think of the journey that had brought her here. From the small East Los Angeles apartment where her parents had worked tirelessly to give her a better future, to the humiliating scene at Elysian Glow, and now, standing at the helm of a brand that would change the industry forever. The woman who had once been dragged out of a store was now the woman leading a revolution, and the world was watching. Legacy had become more than just a store. It was now a movement. As weeks passed since the grand reopening, something remarkable began to unfold. The industry that had once been a bastion of exclusivity was now shifting under the weight of Legacy's new ideals. For the first time, luxury wasn't defined by the exclusion of certain people, but by the inclusion of all, regardless of their appearance, their background, or their perceived worth. The impact was immediate. Other luxury retailers began to take notice. Competitors who had long upheld the traditional idea that luxury is for the few were now being forced to reconsider. Legacy wasn't just offering high-end skincare and accessories. It was offering a new experience, one where people could step through the doors and be treated with respect. A simple thing, perhaps, but a radical departure from the culture of judgment and invisibility that had dominated the industry for decades. The store, once considered an exclusive high-wall domain for the elite, was now a place of connection. Price tags were visible, yes, but no longer hidden as if discussing the cost of luxury was vulgar. Every customer, no matter their social status, was greeted with warmth, given time to explore without being rushed or judged. And it wasn't just the front-facing customer experience that had changed. The training and culture inside Legacy were designed to ensure that every employee felt seen, valued, and heard, from the sales floor to the stockroom. The heart of Legacy's success lay in its foundation of human dignity and fairness. Emma Phoenix, as a creative director, was adamant that luxury could be synonymous with accessibility, and that true excellence didn't need to be veiled in elitism. Luxury is not about shutting others out, she would say during interviews. It's about creating something exceptional for everyone, a space where people can shine regardless of how they look or what assumptions others make about them. But legacy wasn't just an ideal. It was a profitable reality. Within 6 months, the numbers spoke for themselves. Sales had increased by 34% compared to Elysium's figures, and the customer base had diversified dramatically. The core of the business remained high-end, but the demographics had expanded to reflect the true makeup of the cities where the stores operated. Legacy was now catering to a new class of customer, one who didn't just buy luxury products, but believed in the brand's commitment to equity and justice. William Reynolds, always a strategist, was pleased but not surprised. We knew from the start that this was not just the right thing to do. It was a smart thing to do, he said during a press conference. Luxury doesn't just come from price tags or exclusivity. It comes from making people feel valued, giving them access to beauty, quality, and craftsmanship in a way that respects who they are, not how much they can spend. But perhaps the most remarkable shift was in the company's workforce. Unlike other luxury brands where diversity was often tokenized or ignored, Legacy staff reflected the richness of the city itself. More than 70% of Legacy's employees were people of color, and nearly 70% of leadership positions were held by women and minorities. The new employees, many of whom had previously struggled to find opportunities in an industry that often shut them out, now found themselves in a workplace where they could flourish. There was no longer a brand image that excluded people based on skin color or social standing. Instead, Legacy had created a true meritocracy where skills, talent, and hard work were the deciding factors. Legacy's impact went beyond just its employees and customers. The fashion world took notice, with major publications running features on the transformation. Social media influencers, once the gatekeepers of what was in or out, began to advocate for Legacy, not just for its products, but for its values. The old guard, long accustomed to the luxury industry's stratified world, found themselves facing the new reality. That luxury without inclusivity was no longer acceptable. Legacy wasn't just breaking records. It was breaking barriers. The walls that had kept so many people out of the world of luxury were now crumbling. Emma and William had set a new standard. And with each passing day, the world was waking up to the truth. The future of luxury was not about keeping people away. It was about welcoming them in, and in doing so, creating something more extraordinary than anyone had ever imagined. Months after grand reopening of Legacy, the world was still buzzing about the transformation, not just a luxury brand, but of an entire industry. News outlets hailed it as a bold move towards social justice, while critics and competitors scrambled to adjust to the new standards set by Emma Phoenix and William Reynolds. But there was one person who could never escape the weight of what had happened: Charles Bennett. Once the proud store manager of Elysian Glow's flagship, Alexander had believed he held all the cards. His store had been a symbol of wealth, power, and exclusivity until one fateful day, when his arrogance shattered that illusion. The moment he had walked Emma out of the store, assuming that her simple appearance made her unworthy of the luxury products inside, he had unknowingly sealed his own fate. In the months that followed, Alexander had watched from the sidelines as Legacy thrived. He had been cast aside, a mere footnote in a story of redemption and transformation that he had helped create. But it wasn't just the company's success that gnawed at him. It was a quiet knowledge that he was a villain in a narrative where every wrong had been righted except his own, what was left of his career. A tarnished reputation that no luxury brand would touch. Not even as a manager at the lowest-tier retail stores could Alexander find a place. The industry he had once ruled with a heavy hand now turned its back on him. His name had become synonymous with prejudice, humiliation, and poor judgment. One afternoon, months after the scandal, Alexander found himself working in a discount cosmetics store in a far-flung neighborhood of the city. It was the kind of place he had once looked down on, the kind of place he would never have deigned to set foot in when he had been at the top. But now, it was where he was relegated, donning the red vest of value beauty. His new customers were far from the high-end clients he was used to, but in some twisted way, he understood that he deserved this fate. The irony of his position was not lost on anyone who knew his story. The man who had once kicked a woman out of a luxury store now greeted customers with the same forced smile he had once reserved for VIPs. But there was no longer any power behind it. His hand shook slightly as he handed over samples. His voice trembled when he spoke to clients. He was now serving those he had once scorned, the people he had ignored and judged. It wasn't just the customers who noticed a change. His former colleagues, those who once worked alongside him at Elysium, would often walk past the store, their gazes lingering as they saw him behind the counter. Some pretended not to see him, while others took pity on him. Alexander had once thought himself untouchable, his position at Elysium unassailable. Now he was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a man who had lost everything because of his refusal to see people for who they were, instead of what he assumed they could afford. But there was no one to blame but himself. For Emma Phoenix and William Reynolds, however, the story had come full circle. Emma had faced the very worst of the system, only to rise above it. William, always by her side, had made sure that change wasn't just about holding others accountable. It was about creating a better world for everyone. They had set out to not just expose the broken systems of exclusion, but to build something better. And now, Charles Bennett's fate was a reflection of that change. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice. A justice that didn't need to be loud or flashy, but one that came in the form of quiet consequence. Alexander's redemption, if it came at all, would only be possible if he chose to confront the prejudice that had cost him everything. For now, however, he was left to reflect on the stark truth. Legacy isn't just about what we build. It's about what we leave behind. And Alexander had left behind a legacy of exclusion, one that had now been replaced by something far more powerful. The story of Emma Phoenix and William Reynolds was more than just a tale of personal humiliation and corporate justice. It was a testament to the power of dignity, resilience, and transformation. Emma had been treated as an outsider, judged solely by her appearance and the assumptions others made about her. But she refused to let that humiliation define her. Instead, she turned it into a force for change, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt like they didn't belong in spaces of privilege and wealth. William, by her side, understood that true justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoers. It was about creating a new way forward, a way that didn't rely on exclusion, but instead welcomed everyone who valued excellence and authenticity, no matter their background. Together, they built Legacy, a brand that stood as a beacon of inclusion and opportunity, where people were valued for who they were, not what they could buy. And while Charles Bennett's fall from grace was a clear reminder that arrogance and prejudice have consequences, the true victory wasn't in his downfall. It was in the rise of a new standard, one where luxury wasn't defined by who was excluded, but by who was embraced. In the end, the real moral of the story was this. Real power comes not from dominating others, but from lifting them up. The true legacy that Emma and William left behind wasn't just a successful company, but a movement, one that proved that the world of luxury could be more than just a place for the elite. It could be a place for everyone.